So let's go ahead and take a quick peek at the program of studies. Many of you may be asking, what is the program of studies? And that's a pretty fair question. One way to think about the program of studies is to think of it as a blueprint for learning expectations. Additionally, there are different blueprints or programs of study that match the length of time a student has been learning the language. In high school, you'll primarily see a 3-year program for those who started in grade 10 and a 6-year program for those who started in junior high. We'll focus on these two programs of study. Now within this learning blueprint, you will find 4 significant sections: applications, language competence, global citizenship, and a strategy section. We will look at each of these a little bit later when I show you how and where to access the program of studies. These 4 sections are not taught separately nor sequentially, but they can be thought of as a spiral where we're constantly integrating all elements of the language as we move further towards our goal. Within each section, you will see general outcomes stating broad requirements and a list of specific outcomes that identify specific skill and/or product requirements from students. We can think of these outcomes as learning targets or learning expectations. These targets do change based on the program of studies used. For example, in a 3-year program grade 10 class, we would expect students to be able to exchange basic hellos and goodbyes. Whereas in the 6-year program, we would expect students to extend their knowledge of personal communication towards casual exchanges with fellow students. To evaluate what a student will learn upon the completion of a course, we commonly ask ourselves, what is the minimum that students should know? Again, these targets do change based on the program of studies used. For example, in a 3-year grade 10 class, we may expect that students can communicate in basic and structured contexts, whereas in the 6-year program, we'd expect that students are able to extend their communicative skills towards a broader range of contexts. Once we have our minimum requirements set, we can begin to incorporate student interests and preferences to help them connect to the language personally. At the same time, however, even though we set a minimum, we never underestimate what our students can accomplish. So if we can think back to our basic communication skills requirement, the program of studies would have an outcome such as managing personal relationships. But instead of focusing on the nitty-gritty details of the blueprint, we would ask ourselves, what is the minimum that students should communicate in their personal relationships? For a 3-year grade 10 class, we would start with something basic like introductions in a structured environment. And with a 6-year program, we would start to look at how we can chat with our friends in everyday situations. From there, rather than focusing on traditional pen and paper vocab drills, we think of an authentic scenario to build around so that students can better apply their language skills in context. And it's at that point that we can return back to the program of studies to see where we can incorporate the individual requirements in an integrative manner. This integrative approach allows us to exceed the requirements, and students can achieve at levels much higher than if they were just to practice simple conjugation drills all the time. Additionally, this approach lends itself very nicely to task-based learning and to portfolio work. With portfolios, we can literally assign specific program of studies targets as portfolio requirements where students can take pieces from the POS and use them to build their overall abilities throughout the semester. With task-based lessons, we are providing students comprehensible input, allowing them the opportunity to get hands-on experience with their learning. This is also a collaborative approach, which allows students to learn from and with each other. This integrative process also aligns with the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, which assesses students' levels of language ability on a globally used scale. The scale focuses on communicative skills, and the level assigned can be used to assess your readiness for potential future requirements or potential desires. On completion of the 3-year program, we would expect the majority of our students to land somewhere in the elementary A2 level, which prepares them nicely for university level classes. With the 6-year program, the bulk of students would find themselves at the lower intermediate stage. Some may be at a level slightly higher or lower, but all students would be prepared for university level courses, and some would potentially be able to challenge and receive university credit based on their level. So why are these levels important? Well, because globally they can be used for school admissions or for specific course requirements, and higher levels may even open up job opportunities that would have not otherwise been available. In my personal experience, I had to pass a B2 level ability test in Spain in order to take classes at the Universidad Pontificia de Comillas Madrid.
Long story short, when we learn a new language, we never know where it's going to take us, and we never truly know just where we might land.
So now that we have a base level introduction of the program of studies, let's take a quick look and I'll take you through where and how you can find the program of studies. So in order to find the various programs of study that are offered by Alberta Education and the Government of Alberta, you're going to want to open up an internet browser. So I'm just going to use Google here. What you're going to want to type in is program. So it's program of studies is the first one that pops up. You can type in alternatively Alberta program of studies, and it'll be the first one that pops up there. So you see programs of study from the Alberta government, Alberta Education. So we're going to click that, and that'll take us to this page here. So here you'll find all of the different programs of study that are available. So those include as well for all the other classes. We're going to go down to international languages, and since we're in high school, we'll go to 10 to 12. If you notice, you'll see French has its own section here. Nonetheless, we are part of international languages as a Spanish class. So once we click that, that'll take us to this page here, and here you'll find all the different languages that are offered by Alberta Education, or at least the ones that have programs of program of studies available offered by Alberta Education. You might find some individualized courses around the province as well. We're going to go down to Spanish, click that, and if you see, we have 4 separate programs of studies here. So as we kind of mentioned earlier, the 2 major ones that you'll see in high school are these 2 right here. So this one being the 3-year program, so for students that enter into Spanish in grade 10. This one is a 6-year program, so students will have 3 years of Spanish experience coming out of junior high. This program is a 9-year, so they'll typically have 6 years of experience, so these students will usually start in elementary and now 6 years of experience going into grade 10. And the last one here is the bilingual program, but again, we're just going to focus on these 2 here as they're the most common that you'll see in high school. So when we open those up, what you'll see is this is the 3-year program, this is the 6-year program, and they look very similar, but there are some key differences. So we'll go to page 5 here, and if you remember, we kind of discussed the 4 major pillars supporting our program of studies, and this is a 3-year program again, and if we go to the 6-year program, again, we have the same 4 pillars. Now you'll notice that some of these might be a little bit different. So this is where we start to see some of the differences. So for example, you can see that some of the general outcomes that are offered as part of the applications pillar here don't necessarily coincide perfectly with the ones offered in the 6-year program. Nonetheless, they are fairly similar, but once you start getting into the specific outcomes, it does vary a little bit more, so that is something to keep an eye on for sure. So now let's maybe take a little bit of a look more formally at how we would use the program of studies in a classroom. And for now, we'll just stick with the standard 3-year program, just so that we don't have to flip back and forth between the 2 programs of study. So as we've kind of mentioned already, we would definitely be integrating all 4 of these pillars in unison rather than a traditional approach which may look to just focus on applications and then move on to perhaps global citizenship. And if not, then certainly it would have looked a lot like you would have been focusing on a specific point before moving to the next one, then to the next one. In this new communicative approach, what you're actually trying to do is, as we saw that spiral, which actually, if we move up a little bit, you can see right there, all we do is we essentially move up that spiral, but what we're doing is we're focusing on all of them at the same time. So all the pillars are being integrated within each lesson. Now we may choose to center around one. In particular, if we're trying to target something in particular, perhaps a new phonetic sound, then there's certainly some things that we might focus around. But the lesson overall is still integrated around all four, so we're never losing track of the entire scope of the language, because that's what language is. It's never going to be simply just strategies, right? Strategies alone aren't going to teach you the language, so that's why we're constantly integrating. So if we want to keep looking further down, basically what we're thinking about throughout, again, is that idea of communication. So what is the minimum level of communication that we want our students to have coming out of this program? So from that, we would probably select some sort of basic lesson that we want them to accomplish either by the end of the lesson, by the end of the week, by the end of the month, whatever it is. And as we kind of mentioned already, at that point you would come back and you would look into the program of studies and you would say, oh, well, in this lesson I can definitely target this point here, and maybe there's a grammatical point somewhere down at the bottom, and you kind of combine those little points. So again, it's an integrative approach where you're combining all of them at the same time. So that is just a little bit of a brief introduction of what the program of studies looks like. So hopefully you're a little bit more comfortable with what you can expect from the year, from the semester, and from your overall learning journey. Myself, as a teacher, being a second language learner myself, I think that I bring a unique experience in that I understand what the learning process looks like. So for particularly when we get down into some of the strategies that we see towards the bottom of the program of studies. So these are all the different strategies that are listed that we can look at. These are particularly some of the things that helped me as a language learner. So I have some personal experience with these that I think helps me to help transmit that to students in an effective way, because I've seen it, because I've gone through it myself. I'm not just reading a point off of the program of studies and telling students what to do. So hopefully students find a pretty flexible classroom environment where essentially they're the ones that drive whatever we're going to be learning. It's their interests that are at the helm. It's not me nor my agenda. I have the program of studies that provides that minimum requirement aspect that we mentioned, but it's the students themselves that end up driving where the content actually ends up going. So again, hopefully this was interesting and somewhat productive, and hopefully some of your questions were answered in learning about the program of studies.